In this video, I'm going to share with you the 3 biggest signs that your shadow work is actually working. So let's dive straight in. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you are new around here, my name is Christina and I help people on their spiritual and healing journey so they can have a more fulfilling and purposeful driven life. So with that all being said, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so that you're notified of when a new video comes out. Now all of that is out of the way, let's get on to the good stuff. I think there's so much content out there, so much information about how to do shadow work, what is shadow work, and all these tips and tricks and journal prompts of things to do when working with your shadow. But there comes a time when, well, how do I know it's actually working? I've been on this journey for so long. How can I tell when shadow work is actually, it's done its job, or I'm making some progress? And the first thing you can tell if your shadow work, your practice, or whatever it is you've been doing is actually working is that you're no longer getting triggered by the things that used to trigger you, whether that is a person saying something to you, whether that's hearing stories about trauma, or you have an emotional reaction to something triggers you. And when this happens, you are no longer bothered by it. I'm not a believer in somebody who thinks your triggers will disappear and be gone forever. I'm somebody that will say, I believe it kind of will always be there, but we kind of come at peace with it. We kind of come into balance in the nervous system, and the trigger it is still there. The wound is kind of almost still there, but we don't react. We don't get an emotional outburst. We don't experience rage. And so this means we're able to be flexible in order to make rational decisions, because when we're triggered, the emotional part of the brain just overrides the logical part of the brain, so then we're not able to make rational, logical decisions. So when we know shadow work is working is when we're able to still be in balance and we're still able to make logical decisions and be flexible. We're able to choose, we're able to respond instead of react. And that's how you know when you are making some progress in your shadow work. It's just simply when you don't seem to be affected by the trigger anymore. So the second biggest thing that you may notice on your healing journey when you're doing shadow work is that you stop projecting blame. You stop projecting onto people. So one of the biggest things people do when they have unmet needs, they have inner child wounds, they have a lot of emotional baggage, they have emotional pain, is what they do is they project any rage onto other people when they've been triggered. They blame other people for their own reactions, when all it is that sad, unhappy, scared little inner child inside of them that's coming out to the surface. And what they do is they often project all their emotional rage onto everybody else and say, well, if you hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have reacted like that. Well, in fact, that rage is just you. And when you're projecting, it's because you're seeing a part of yourself in somebody else that you don't necessarily like. So you're projecting onto that person. So when you are making progress in your healing and doing that shadow work is when you begin to kind of respond. You don't project all of your unhealed emotional baggage onto somebody else. You don't blame them. You don't say that I'm a victim, because the ego will make you project and say, I am the victim, you are the perpetrator, it is your fault, when actually it's your own fault, because you have that wounding, that emotional baggage, because it's kind of gets ignited within you when you get triggered, and then you project and you lash out and you react to somebody at somebody else. And my third and final biggest sign that you shadow work is actually working is that you are no longer afraid to be seen. And I think this is one of the biggest signs that you've done a lot of inner work. For me personally, my whole life, I was labeled as shy. I was labeled as an introvert. As I got older, I heard about the word introvert. I wasn't very socially outgoing. I didn't like huge crowds. I kept myself to myself. A lot of the time, I didn't speak up for myself. I kind of went along with the crowd. I would say yes when I really meant no. And I just held myself back because I was afraid. I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid of being seen because of afraid of the judgment. I was afraid of like being on the spot, people watching me, people looking at me, all eyes on me, because I didn't want to receive any criticism. I didn't want to receive judgment. And so this kept myself small. I shrunk my light. I kept myself in a prison cell, and I had the key myself, and I just locked it all up. I locked myself up. I kept myself in a box because I was afraid to be seen. And when I started practicing journaling, I started practicing meditation, I understood what shadow work was, and I dove straight into shadow work when I began to wake up spiritually, because I found what actually raised my vibration and made me progress profoundly spiritually was doing inner work. I was able to raise my vibrations to levels that I never experienced before because I released and let go and accepted parts of myself. So when I started to do all of these practices and that on my spiritual journey, I shifted completely. My whole identity shifted. I no longer identified with the old version of myself. I do not consider myself as a shy person anymore. I still consider myself as somebody that is, yes, a little bit introverted. I'm kind of an extrovert introvert, if that makes sense. I'm somebody that does enjoy being alone with myself. I enjoy solitude. I enjoy going out for walks on nature by myself. And I think the fact that I like to do things on my own is I can go at my own pace. Like I like going shopping on my own. I'd like going to a museum on my own. Wouldn't mind traveling on my own, because I can do things at my own pace and really take it in and enjoy it. But that's not to say I haven't been on holidays with friends, because they are really fun. But what I'm saying here is that yes, I am still very introverted and I like my alone time, but my whole identity shifted when I started doing the inner work. And what the big shift here was, I was no longer afraid. I decided enough was enough. I'm not going to shrink my light anymore. And because I did that inner work, I began to just be more outgoing. I began to have my voice. I wasn't afraid of my voice anymore. And that's when I started this YouTube channel. I began to think, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I'm not actually bothered by anybody's comments. That if people leave negative comments, that's never really bothered me. I just totally ignore it. It just doesn't bother me. So it's when you do that shadow work that one of the biggest signs you can tell that you've done the work and it's working is you are no longer afraid. Either no longer afraid to be seen, either no longer afraid to use your voice, no longer afraid to shine your light. You're no longer afraid of judgment. And this is when we really unlock that prison cell, free ourselves, because we hold the key to transforming our lives, because everything we need is within. And so this means we can step outside of that box ourselves. We trap ourselves in the cell and confine ourselves to a small little box when we choose things out of fear and don't step outside of our comfort zone. And the more inner work I did, the more I stretched myself and took steps. I was starting to go live on Facebook more often. I was starting to do lives in front of my partner because I was even like worried about what my partner might think. And so I stretched myself further and further. And then I did a whole workshop about inner child healing. And so I stretched myself to the point where I'm comfortable with being seen, with being heard, so I'm no longer afraid. So that's one of the biggest signs that your shadow work practice is actually working, because then you kind of don't live your life in fear. You shine your light more and you become that higher version of yourself, because your higher self doesn't confine itself into a box. It has the whole universe at its command. It can get anything it wants to, and you receive that through your higher self. So when we begin to stretch ourselves outside of that comfort zone and do the inner work, we become more of our higher selves. So today's video was super quick video, and if you want to know more about doing inner child healing, I recommend watching this video next. So with that being said, I will see you in that video. Much love.